Hey guys, Cyphus here. Today's DotP one-on-one features Conrad Jaznen. He is the Twitch partner manager. He focuses pretty heavily on Dota 2, and you guys are probably seeing him right now at Kiev. He's been featured as a panelist at the Kiev Major. Obviously has a pretty big passion for Dota 2 and a history working as a player manager. And he spent some time at EG, was the player manager for Cloud9. Just a really interesting guy with a pretty extensive eSports history, and in particular a Dota 2 history. That being said, he also did a ton of stuff in the film industry, which we get into a bit beforehand. He's led a really fascinating life for being as young as he is, being involved in what he's been involved in. I honestly would have loved to have just done an interview about his work in the film industry and getting into all the technical stuff that he did there, working as an assistant director. Scouting locations, just coordinating, background shots. He's a really nice guy. He's really interesting. He's led a great career. I think you're in for a treat with this particular interview. Maybe more so than a lot of other guests who just have that esports background. This is somebody who definitely could have pursued a pretty extensive career in film, and chose to follow his passion in esports. So I'm really thankful that he took the time to sit down with us and give us this interview. I hope that you guys enjoy it. If you want to find him on Twitter and give him a shout out, he's at Conrad Jaznen. That's ConradJanzen. And of course, you know where to find Twitch, twitch.tv. Thanks for tuning into this DotP one-on-one, guys. I hope you enjoy. You are listening to a DotP one-on-one. Pyrian Flax, welcome to the show, sir.
Hello.
That is Casey Atchison. Welcome to the show, Casey.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Welcome, Sunfan.
Hello, friends. It's been a long time.
Mott, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me once again. Very excited to be here.
Austin, Capitalist Walsh. Welcome to the show, Cap.
Thank you very much, man. It's good to be back.
Special guest, Sir Action Slacks. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for having me.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another DotP one-on-one. I'm Cyphus as usual, but today I'm sitting here with Twitch partner manager, Conrad Jaznen. Conrad, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I assume, I can't imagine that anybody is listening to this that doesn't know what Twitch is. I hope for their sake that they haven't been living under that rock. But maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't know what it means to be a partner manager, or what it means to be a Twitch partner. So why don't you give us a rundown of kind of what your role is as a partner manager and what a partner is?
Yeah, sure. So I work in the partnerships department at Twitch. It's very similar to kind of account management. I'm somebody that a lot of partners can reach out to and get information. What we do primarily is focus on one-to-ones or even in group situations, working with partners and making sure that they're taken care of on the onboarding process and afterwards as well. I also negotiate deals on behalf of Twitch to gain content, so things that are maybe outside our scope, like say something like DPL, for instance, Chinese League. I will negotiate the rights for that to be able to be done on Western broadcasts. I also do content acquisition, so that kind of falls into it a little bit, but at the same time,
okay.
It's just kind of a mix of different things, but I come from a technical background as well. I do a lot of broadcast help, so anybody individually needs broadcast help, I also reach out to them and help them out as well.
Cool. What kind of, so when you say you procure content for Twitch, what do you mean in that regard?
So
what kind of content?
Yeah, so say for instance, my major focus right now is obviously Dota 2. I come from a background of esports, but I've been in the Dota scene for about full-time 3-4 years now, pretty heavily. And so what I primarily do is I'll reach out to broadcasters that say aren't signed to Twitch. That might be a team like, say, Secret previously in the past, who is, working heavily with Panda TV, and instead I'll see if they would be interested in, coming onto our platform and streaming on ours, and see what kind of terms and what kind of things that we can kind of come to make sure that we can get, the best broadcasters and the people, stuff that people want to watch on Twitch.
Cool. And then partners, I guess, for those who don't know what a partner is, I guess briefly surmise what a partner is with Twitch and how that benefits them.
Sure. The briefest and quickest explanation is that it's somebody who's able to make revenue on Twitch. So we partner with them, and we give revenue splits and CPMs for advertisements to pretty much allow them to make hopefully a full-time living off of it. That's always our goal. It's one of our goals this year actually, is to really make it accessible for more and more people to have a steady source of income from Twitch.
Who would you say some of like the stars or maybe the epitome? Who would be the epitome of somebody who's been able to achieve that you can think of, like the most notable partners?
At least in the Dota field specifically, Arteezy is definitely one of the top guys. Sing Sing, Admiral Bulldog. I don't know if these guys are full time. Outside of their contracts where they might have either salary through the teams that they're a part of or other things like that. But I know that they can, have an additional revenue source that helps them, reach other goals in their lives, like various different things. I know Arteezy bought a house, and that's really hard to do here in Vancouver, Canada, where housing is really expensive. I guess it's got to be better than YouTube, right? I mean, I know one of the things we hear from a lot of people who used to, or even some of them who still currently create content with YouTube. It seems like Twitch is more advantageous both for the streamer and probably Twitch as well, right? It's definitely a different field. We have our subscription program, which I think creates a different value for a lot of our streamers, and something that's not necessarily available on all our competitors, right? So there's just lots of different revenue options, and we're hoping to add more actually this year. So be excited for that, folks who happen to be streaming or will be as aspiring partners, perhaps even. There's a lot of really cool stuff that allows for different revenue options, and like I said, I think our goal this year is to make having a secondary source of income, or even hopefully a primary source of income, be a full-time or part-time job on the side.
Cool. So you mentioned that you live in Vancouver, or do you currently live in Vancouver?
I do, yeah.
Is that where you grew up?
Yep, I'm born and raised here. Love it. Can't never give it up, except when I probably will be moving to San Francisco very soon.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'll be moving to the headquarters of Twitch, hopefully in a few months now. Just waiting on some fun visa stuff. So. Oh,
great. Well, good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
So when did you get into gaming as a kid? Like what were some of the first games that drew you into video games?
Let me think. The first game I ever played, I believe, was Asteroids on my dad's Atari when I was 3 or 4 years old. So this is 93, 94. My dad had a really old computer. I remember it was in the basement of our first house, and I would just like playing games, and I'd play Asteroids, and that was kind of the only one. And as I grew older, I don't know if you ever heard of this game called Sky Roads. It's a DOS game. It's
nice.
And it's like, I feel like I was more knowledgeable about computers back then because I would always know how to access my games through DOS, and now I look at it and I'm like, where did I leave that file that I just downloaded? So yeah, my gaming's been a big part of my life. My babysitter had an NES. So I played that, and then they got an SNES, and they gave me that NES. So I got pretty proficient at Super Mario World while I was quite young, and Duck Hunt as well. So that's one of my slightly hidden talents, but obviously not exactly super applicable today. But yeah,
speedruns are making a comeback. I keep seeing the speedruns all over the place.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, it's a funny story. I know how to speedrun 16 star. I used to stream actually quite a bit. 16 star speedruns on Super Mario 64. Not too good at it. I'm definitely no Mott. I'm not a world record holder in any games, but I've always enjoyed gaming, and gaming's been always a big part of my life ever since I've been young.
Well, that's cool. Did you go to college, or pursue any higher education at all?
No, none whatsoever. Actually, that's the unique part of my story. I like to think that I regret not going to higher education. Actually, but I've been able to stumble my way through life through lots of work experience and other things to help me get there.
Why do you say you regret it?
I don't know. I do think there is a growing up stage in when you go to university, and I think I lost touch with a lot of my friends who went to university. Most people stayed local here. We have the UBC and SFU located campuses, just very close by, and I guess. I feel like there's something else I could have learned there. Perhaps I don't regret it. I don't regret it at all. I actually, when I left high school, I worked in the film industry for many years, working as a PA and then eventually as an AD and a locations guy. So I've had a bunch of unique experiences that I say I would never give them up, actually. So
yeah. I was going to ask because I had noticed that. Not to sound like a stalker or anything, but I was about to interview you after all, and saw that on your LinkedIn profile that you'd worked for the Directors Guild of Canada. So you said you were doing location work and like a AAD work. PA work. Did you work on anything that we might know?
Oh yeah. Definitely worked on some of those big Hollywood productions. Biggest one probably that people remember is Elysium. I worked on that. I was an AD on the second unit for that. So all the explosions and fun stuff, that was pretty cool. I worked on Fringe for 2 seasons. It's a Fox television show, kind of similar to X-Files, Monster of the Week format. I worked on Planet of the Apes. I've worked on a ton of terrible things that you'll never see as well. Lots of Lifetime movies and that sort of stuff. I think I worked on the Halo series. Actually, that was kind of like the cool crossover for me. Forward Unto Dawn. That was filmed here in Vancouver.
Oh wow! Didn't they put that on? Wasn't it out on Netflix or something in advance of Halo 4? I want to say.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think they did it through Netflix, or I think they might have had it on the Xbox service exclusively and then brought it to Netflix. That's what it was. But it's on Netflix now. I worked on that. That was pretty fun. That's actually shot primarily at SFU. The Vancouver film industry is actually huge, and especially with our lovely tax credits and low dollar, it's very enticing. Most of your popular.
Oh, I see you worked on The Killing.
I worked.
Oh yeah, that was a great series. That was
I worked on the first season of that. That was pretty good. I had a great time on that show.
That season.
Yeah. A lot of people say. I mean, it definitely. Obviously, people weren't. Actually, I shouldn't spoil anything, but it was a fantastic show to work on. That one that was my first AD gig. So it was a big one for me. Once Upon a Time was a popular one. I forget. Everybody loves that show. I've never really seen it, but.
You should. It's pretty good. Hell, you worked on it. You might as well.
Yeah.
So wait.
Go ahead.
Why? All right. So as a young kid, my dream was to do screenwriting. That was something I always wanted to pursue. Mm-hmm. And as I got older and got a little more realistic with like, all right, here are my realistic options. Like if I don't want to move to like an LA or New York or apparently a Vancouver. Jesus, if only I'd known. If I don't want to do that, I got to find something else to do. And it wasn't until much later in life that we even started doing this podcast, and that was kind of the. I love doing this. I won't say that it's like a consolation prize by any means, but it can feel that way compared to the dream of possibly doing screenwriting. I can't imagine getting involved in the film industry and leaving it. Why did you do that? Like what weren't there like dreams of directing your own shows or directing your own feature films at some point that maybe would have motivated you to stay around?
I don't know, actually. It's funny because I think a lot of people look at film and they look at this creative world where I looked at it as very much a technical job. Funny story, my dad worked at Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is called like an equivalent of a major broadcasting company for 30 years. And I said I would never do it. And then I ended up working in the film industry doing something very similar. And it's funny because I always looked at it as a very technical job, not necessarily as a creative job. Being a locations person, you're looking for locations that would suit, to fake Vancouver to look like New York or something else. And AD work was, purely just people management and timing and, the most creative I think you got was I got to set the background when I was an AD. So anytime you see somebody pass in the background, that's me telling them when to go and that kind of stuff. So it's funny. I never looked at it much as a creative job. And I always had aspirations to kind of do my own stuff, but the expenses and that kind of stuff, and when you're working in film, you're working 75-hour weeks. Like it's, and that's a minimum. And it's really hard to really do stuff in your free time, I guess you could say, unless you're truly, truly passionate about it.
So I'm almost reluctant to take it back to Dota because all of this sounds fascinating to me. But were you playing Dota in the midst of these 75-hour weeks? Like, where did Dota kind of come into your life in this mix?
So Dota actually came into my life before that. I played in high school, so God, I can't even remember what patch it was, but it was 6.x, which doesn't really narrow it down, I guess you could say. I'm trying to think of what hero came out. What was the last hero I remember coming out? I think it might have been Invoker. Might have been the hero that was coming out at the time. So I had an experience of playing Dota in high school with one of my friends. He introduced me to it. I actually bought Warcraft 3 just for Dota. I've always been a big StarCraft fan. So when I was working in film, it wasn't actually very much. There wasn't a lot of gaming happening. And when it was gaming, it was StarCraft 2. That was definitely my go-to game during that time. And then later on, as I kind of moved more heavily into esports and more full-time esports, Dota 2 kind of reared its head and came back, especially with, the introduction of it coming to Steam and stuff.
So were there options while working in the film industry? Like, are there career paths where you could have wound up, doing something like, being the prime for directing something for whether it was, the Directors Guild or CBC? I mean, or did it seem kind of, or was it more dead end?
It's a little dead endish. It's not, I wouldn't even call it dead end, but it is a long career path through a lot of hoops and a lot of politics. And I think that's what was one of the things that really turned me off from continuing it. The biggest thing is that there's four AD positions on a film, or most on a film. Sometimes you'll bring extras, especially for bigger films and bigger television shows, but that's primarily your career path. And it's going to take you maybe 20 years to become a first AD. They're the first person you'll see on the credit roll when the credits roll, but that's a long time to make something happen. And I just don't know if I was ready for that kind of career path. And the 75 hours a week was already starting to kind of weigh on me a little bit.
So if there wasn't much gaming going on at this point, how did esports come about for you then?
So at the time, I was actually a writer for EG. They were looking for writers at the time. I happened to have worked, I think it was IPL3, and I met somebody there. His name's Lucas. He was the editor-in-chief back then, and I asked, hey, do you need some writers? And I joined the writing team, and I met a whole bunch of great people there, and that's kind of how I got my start into esports a little more full-time, was through Evil Geniuses.
Yeah, I noticed that, again, on your professional background, that you worked your way into video production for them. So how do you go from, doing, some, I'm assuming like freelance writing for them, or was it volunteer writing, or were you like paid to be on the writing staff?
Volunteer writing.
What was that gig?
Some people were paid writers, but I was definitely one of the newer bloods when I came on.
So how did you segue that into doing video production with them? I mean, is that where that Directors Guild background kind of came into play and helped?
Yeah, a little bit. My background in film and television definitely helped a little bit, along with just I've always been interested in cameras and filming and stuff. So that really helped. And they were looking to ramp up their video production team. There's now somebody, he currently works at Twitch as well. His name's Sean Green. He started the video team there at Twitch under somebody else who hired him, and we ended up working together for many years doing kind of video content, so stuff interviews at events, and even just like regular stuff like, hey, this is a blank an advertisement, a sales thing, advertisement for some tips or something like that. So he's a fantastic videographer, and he recently actually just released a documentary on Twitch. I highly recommend everybody check it out.
What's it called?
It's called, I just forgot. I was just thinking about it too. I was gonna say buckshot, but it's not buckshot. It's. I feel really bad now. 1 second.
So, I'm just I'm gonna lie to you and tell you that we'll fix it in post. And
no, I know we won't, and
you don't
that's
have to worry about it.
that's the worst part about this format, for me at least. But no, it's. I honestly can't remember. I'm sorry. I'll come back to it. It'll come back to me in just a second.
So you're doing video production work at EG. What kind of stuff? What kind of stuff are you getting into, and how much control did you have over the types of content that was being created?
I had actually almost full control. So me and Sean were pretty much a full team all to ourselves, along with Anna Prosser. She ended up contributing, and we all worked together as a team to build essentially any type of video that was kind of required. So we did a lot of the announcement videos. A lot of people look back on those, the joke of announcements and that kind of stuff. We kind of creatively came up together and built that sort of stuff over and over, and that was just kind of how we did. So we had control from the very beginning of like the concept and the idea to the shooting essentially the acting and all that kind of stuff, as well all the way to the end to the post-production and kind of final say on what kind of gets released.
Was it primarily focused on one game in particular, or were you guys kind of running the gamut there?
Biggest thing right then was StarCraft. EG kind of built its name around StarCraft for many years, had top players all throughout the majority of when StarCraft 2 was what kind of the biggest game within the eSports scene. So we really, really focused on that. We did some announcements for some other games, and those ended up being successful too. But at the time when we were both doing video production, or at least when I was involved with the video production team, it was really heavily focused on StarCraft 2.
So where does this transition into more Dota centric stuff start happening for you?
Sure. So back in, I don't know if it was 2013 or 2014, it must have been 2013. Sir Scoots, who's a longtime esports legend, and I attribute a lot of my success in the esports scene thanks to him. He's fantastic. He's primarily doing a lot of CSGO stuff now, but back then he was the main broadcast guy for Evil Geniuses. So he ended up leaving the production, or he ended up leaving the organization, and I kind of took the mantle for doing broadcast production. And one of the things we ended up adding on was a program called D2L, which, if you've been following the Dota scene for many years, that's the Dota 2 League featuring AC, who's currently working at Twitch, but is not as heavily involved in the Dota scene as he used to be.
Yeah, I remember meeting AC. I think it was like TI 5, I want to say. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it would have been TI 5. That's awesome. Obviously he's a very talented caster and just a talented guy all around. So, mm-hmm. So you kind of started focusing on Dota more at that point. Did you hang on to your StarCraft love, or did you start kind of transitioning over into just even in your personal time playing Dota at some point as well? Like where did the Dota really kick into high gear at that point?
I think it really kicked in during that time. Just there's so much Dota going on, and the internationals at that time were very, very exciting. I think if you ended up watching those events back then, there was no way you couldn't play Dota like right after that event happened. It was really emotional, and especially Battle Royale Hall, very different atmosphere. And I think they're kind of bringing that back with the majors, which I'm kind of excited about. But it really, really pushed me to start playing a lot more Dota. I've always been a multi-gaming guy. I really love story games, and I really love puzzle games. So if you look at my Steam profile, you'll probably see me playing a lot of that. But Dota is definitely my esport and my competitive game that I go to quite often.
So when did the transition happen from EG to Cloud9? What made you want to pursue it? What were the circumstances around it?
Sure. It wasn't necessarily a decision. It was more of ended up happening. I was transitioning out of Evil Geniuses due to some visa issues. So I was leaving the United States at that time. And I I've known Charlie for many years. When I was at Evil Geniuses, I also did some assistant managing. So by assistant managing, I mean the manager at the time was taking a sabbatical. I was the one that would take over during that time. So it was a very different age too, where one manager would handle multiple teams. So I was handling 5 teams at DreamHack 2012, 2013. Oh. That's a lot. Yeah. It was quite a bit. And I really got to have a great experience. I met a lot of the players I've known. That's helped me kind of keep those contacts through Fear and Universe for many years. A lot of the old guys, I still talk to B-Diz occasionally and Jo from Vancouver. So we don't talk as much, but I still try and keep in touch with as many people as possible. Got to meet Sexy Bambo back then as well. Lots of different people.
So, and that kind of led to, at some point, you kind of transitioning, well, once you had the visa issue.
Sorry, yes, the visa issue. And then Charlie actually recommended me for this Cloud9 position because their manager at the time was transitioning out. And Charlie knew I had a good relationship with players. I was, even though it was minor, I have I would say player managing and very similar to ADing was one of my fortes, managing people and making sure that they're taken care of and ready to do what they need to do when they need to do it. So Charlie recommended me for the position. I accepted. A couple months after, my first event, I think, was Starletter 9. It was a really good one. It was a really interesting experience. But yeah, that's sort of how I transitioned to do Cloud9 at that time.
So I mean, imagine you see a lot of interesting stuff, we'll say, working with players. What's maybe what are some of the highlights looking back at your time with Cloud9 and even with some of the managing work that you did with EG? What would you say were the big highlights of your time with those two organizations?
Sure. I mean, I think the biggest highlights is a lot of the relationships I've kept with the players. I still talk to, I don't know if many people recall, MSS was actually on Evil Geniuses at one point. And I call him a great friend and I talk to him quite often. And it's been really nice to see kind of his development within the Dota scene. I will never forget the 3-hour match we had against, I believe it was Scary Faces, or was it Vega? That's Cloud9, and that I never want to ever repeat. And same, you know what? It's all the relationships with the players is really the big thing for me, and seeing a lot of the success of those players, post managing Cloud9. Look at, No Tail and Misery, both actually 5 out of the 6 out of the 7 players that I've managed have won a major or a TI, and maybe 7. Oh, maybe it's there's 8 players, and 7 of them have been to a grand finals, and then there's one that hasn't done either. So all of them have had lots of success since after Cloud9. So that to me is what makes me proud. It's seeing these guys do really well. So that's No Tail, Misery, Eternal Envy, Fada, Aoi, Pylai Dai, Bone 7. Am I missing somebody? I think that's it.
What would you say? What would you say some of the biggest challenges have been, or what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced while you were trying to manage players? What were some of the heartaches, the day-to-day heartaches, and maybe even some of the major ones?
Sure. I would say the hardest thing about being a player manager is having 2 bosses, especially when you're part of an organization such as Cloud9 or Evil Geniuses. You have to report to the management of the organization, and you are technically reporting to the players in some ways. And finding that fine balance, especially when both parties don't meet eye to eye on certain things, is really a difficult kind of case to be. Back then, at least when I was player managing, my salary was paid for by the organization, so therefore I should be seeking out the organization's interests. But at the same time, I tend to be a very player-centric person, and I want to create a healthy environment for these players. And if I feel like the organization's not going to provide that, you don't have to follow orders to a T all the time, and you have to find that fine balance between the two. I think my management style was successful, but maybe sometimes lacking in harshness. I think I was too nice to the players. I wish I was a little more harsh and maybe a little more realistic with them when things weren't always the best. But I'm proud of all of them. Like I said, I'm happy no matter what happened. that all those players, I just want to see them be successful and continue on, doing Dota for as long as they can and as long as they love the game. That's the biggest thing to me.
So, that behind the scenes thing, I think, is what, especially for the casual Dota fan, and maybe, obviously even for a lot of the diehard fans, that behind the scenes stuff, I think, is what a lot of people are maybe, most interested in and least knowledgeable about. Like what kind of disagreements would arise between management and players? Like what would kind of spark those types of conflicts?
I mean, it could be small things like, looking to go to tournaments and say, maybe they want single rooms for this event, right? And that's going to cost extra. Whose pocket does that come out of? Does it come out of the prize pool? Does it come out of the organization? Is this one of the things they provide? I think players in general don't like having advertising obligations, even though that does help pay the salary. It is... I can understand the frustration on that point, especially in a very competitive field like Dota, where you want to be performing at your top level at all times. And then when you have to do, a sponsorship video, well, that just is time that you're not going to be focusing on being a good competitive player, right? So it's tough to say on that front. Those were the kind of the big ones for me. I think a lot of the players on Cloud9 at my time were also very camera shy, and they didn't like having cameras around. And we did some documentary stuff at TI5, so I could see that maybe that might have been something where I maybe should have stood my ground and said this wasn't worth it, or a lot of people are private, and I get that, but as esports is going to get,
at the same time they're kind of choosing. And it is a choice at the end of the day. They're still kind of choosing to pursue a career that puts them in the public eye and kind of has to put them in the public eye as well, right? I mean, if they want, right? I mean, if nobody's watching, then you're not going to make money doing it, right?
Exactly.
So you almost kind of have to put yourself in the public eye. I hear that's one thing I hear a lot. When it comes to players in particular, is kind of that camera shy element and wanting to maintain privacy. But now that you're working at Twitch, don't you kind of, isn't it also kind of ironic that many of them wind up, streaming their games in front of a camera, as maybe one of their primary sources of income, at this point going forward?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's cool that opportunity is available, and it's kind of funny to see, people that I thought would be very camera shy, have a much more revealing personality, versus their stream personality, for instance. They could be very relaxed and chill in person, and then their stream personality is a lot more excited or a lot more vocal than their actual personality. And I think that's kind of cool, is that we're just providing another medium to be yourself in a different way, maybe a little bit, or maybe you're not comfortable doing the same sort of things in person, but you get to bring the audience and, like I said, that behind the scenes look a little bit into how you might act as a player.
Yeah, for sure. So do you make any, obviously you spend a lot of your time now at Twitch, seeking out new content on behalf of Twitch. Mm-hmm. Do you still get to make any of your own content? Is that something that you try to pursue on the side still, or are you mostly just focused on what's going on with Twitch?
So I made one video. I've only ever made one video. It was only recently. It was talking about the invite system for the Kiev Major, and I actually, funny story, botched my audio and had to use my OBS audio for that. And it had a whole bunch of, I don't know if you ever use Slack. No,
never have.
It's very similar to Discord. It's essentially like I would call an enterprise version, a corporate version of Discord. And it has a very distinct notification sound, which is knocking. And I didn't realize when I cut the audio that all this knocking was available after I messed up my audio in another program. So I had to use the OBS, and this OBS audio had all these knocking sounds. So people said there's a bunch of sounds in the video. I've always thought about making my own content, but I would rather help facilitate others. I've never been one to be in front of the camera, ironically to say. I've always liked being behind the camera and kind of facilitating and creating what I think could be a cool experience for both the audience, the person itself, and all these sort of things. I definitely have some opinions on movies, especially, and a lot of opinions on Dota and like where I think the scene should go and stuff like that. But I don't know if just me speaking into a microphone and looking at a camera is the most effective way for me to do that. I think I love video editing. I miss video editing, in fact, so I might come up with some more unique solutions on how to create some content. I wrote a couple parodies, but my voice is a little low in the singing range, so there's no parodies. Maybe I'll hit up Fosh, and maybe she can help me out.
Hey, you kick them our way, we'll help out.
Sounds good.
Yeah, we'd love to. We did Boys in the Pub recently.
I loved it.
Hack. Oh, okay. I'm glad you got to see it.
Oh yeah. I my pulse, my heartbeat, or like, I don't know how to describe it. I have my finger on the pulse of our Dota 2. That's how they describe it.
Good to know.
So I'm going through our new and everything. So I see it all.
So, I mean, is that the kind of content that you'd like to do, is kind of that, comedy parody, or do you think that you would want to pursue something where you're doing more commentary on the scene at large?
I think a bit of column A, a bit of column B. My personality used to be much more vocal and much more memey, I guess you could say. I definitely like the memes. But as I've grown a little bit older, I definitely have some thoughts that I want to get out on, say the Dota scene in general, and how I think we could, as a whole, improve the Dota scene right now. Will my video be the thing that's going to change our minds on, how much we should value tier 2 tournaments? Probably not. But maybe somebody wants to hear those thoughts. But I've had a very unique position of being able to see how well and how effective content does on Twitch, which is the primary platform to view Dota 2 these days. I know there's other platforms, but I would say the majority of Dota content in the world is consumed on Twitch right now. And
if I'm not watching in client, I'm watching on Twitch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so
go ahead.
A long story short is that I think I have some ideas and thoughts, but one thing I've realized is that nobody really, is interested in the tier 2 Dota scene versus, other games like CSGO and League of Legends, where there are audiences for that. Dota is a very unique field in terms of kind of how content is consumed, and primarily it's through live, which is amazing because I think that's hard to do. But we look at the content creators and we look at, say, even top streamers. There's nobody that's not a pro or somebody involved in the pro scene. Which is a very unique situation that I think is rarely emulated in any other esport.
Yeah, I mean, what do you see as being kind of the barrier to entry for audience members, looking at those tier 2 tournaments? I mean, is there something we could be doing to correct that? Do we need to bring in, is it about bringing in big name talent? Is it about advertising it the right way? I mean, what do you think? What's going on there, and what would you propose to fix it?
I mean, the hardest thing is that sponsorships in Dota already are pretty tough to acquire. Just in general, Dota is not a very intuitive game to do ad sales or sales in general with teams and stuff. And especially with the major system, they don't do sales, right? So nobody can sell into that. I think it just requires people to be willing to watch more different content. People will watch a lot of different tournaments, but, are people running tier 2 tournaments? Not particularly. We're looking at something maybe like Canada Cup, Beat Invitational. Those guys, they'll run tier 2 stuff, but I can barely name any other leagues. Join Dota League, Defense. Like, these leagues have kind of disappeared over the past few years, and we're not seeing that content anymore.
Yeah, do you think some of that has to do with the format that Dota kind of commands? I always feel like I start every major, and most recently I did this with DAC, where I'm like, you know what? I've got time during the day. I'm gonna watch every game on my phone while I'm at work, and I'm gonna finish games when I get home at night. And then, day 1 ends and I've got 2 games I didn't watch from day 1. And then day 2 rolls around and now I've got, 4 games from day 2. And day 3 rolls around and now I've still got day 2 games to catch up before I can even get into day 3. I mean, there's so much Dota, and games are so long that sometimes we only have time for the highlights. I mean, do you think that kind of plays into maybe why those tier 3 or those tier 2 tournaments aren't really taking place?
Yeah, a little bit. Right now, kind of the best thing that we have is like the majors, and that drives a lot of viewership. And the qualifiers is actually probably the best example of top tier 2 talent being able to kind of get that, how would I call it? Just kind of get that advantage, right? Where they're going to be given a platform where they can be viewed. There's no easy solution, There's a lot of Dota, but I think there is still room for a tier 2 scene. There is a room for more online tournaments, but Dota fans particularly love LAN events and just in general how great and fun and cool it is when you see somebody there, right? You really know it's competitive once it's a LAN, right? There's no online, there's nobody lagging out, there's no pauses sometimes there is, but stuff like that. It's always like a really interesting way, and I would love to see. I would love to see more online content around that, but I also know, like I said, how difficult it is to do sales. So personally, I think the best approach would be hopefully some support from Valve, but I know that is also another interesting kind of water to navigate. And for them, would it be worth it for them to do, right? So,
right. Are you happy with the Dota scene at large as in its current form with the majors and with the third party tournaments that, I mean, obviously still focus on tier 1 teams, but I mean, overall, do you like the direction that the Dota scene is headed?
Oh yeah. I mean, for me personally, I'm a big fan of top play. When I watch esports content, I tend to only watch the top stuff because that's what interests me the most, is seeing the highest level being played at any time, and arguably tier 2 teams in any esport might not be able to provide that. So I definitely understand that sentiment of people having that same mentality, especially a game that is so competitively focused like Dota. But I am very happy. I think it's in a healthy place for now, and maybe it could decline in the next few months or maybe even the next year. Just based on sort of natural progression of people being interested in other things, just games in general kind of evolving. I think 7.0 was great, really revitalized Dota in general. It made me start playing more Dota than I ever have. I'll say that. I still think it's a fantastic game, both as a game and as a scene right now, at least for me.
You mentioned that you kind of have your finger on the pulse of our Dota.
Yeah.
And our Dota kind of gets pointed to as this maybe the epitome of the toxicity that can sometimes exist in the Dota 2 community. Mm-hmm. And obviously that may be more a commentary on the fans than it is on the players, the organizations. But I mean, do you feel like you see that toxicity as well? Do you feel like it maybe it's overhyped or overplayed? And do you see that as potentially having a negative impact on the scene at large?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this is that I think our Dota 2 is a vocal minority of Dota fans. And it is frustrating. I definitely understand when people say, "Oh yeah, Dota 2 is toxic." I'm like, I absolutely agree. It's not exactly the most healthy game if you don't have some of the mental fortitude, and sometimes even beyond that, even if you have mental fortitude, it can be a very negative experience. I think Dota has a little bit of problem with toxicity, especially in pubs. And I would love to see some changes to that, but I don't have a good enough solution right now to kind of how to solve that problem.
I don't think anybody does.
And
my
that's
solution
the hard part,
is for Valve to just let me ban players, and I'll take care of the bad apples.
Yeah, exactly. And so does everyone. I hope everybody else has that same sentiment, right? And then if nobody plays Dota, there won't be any toxicity.
I will be the Batman of Dota. All right.
Yeah.
I will get all of the villains out of the Gotham that is the Dota 2 pub scene. All right.
Yeah, no, and
I promise.
I do wish there was some more tools or maybe more moderation on that front. But it's really tough. A game where you have 1 million concurrent almost every day, or every month, sorry.
Yeah,
like it's a lot of people to kind of keep your eye on and be able to weed out those people who are being toxic. And for some people, for them, they feel it's part of the just part of the game. And I'm like, well, different people, different things, right? Not my cup of tea, for instance, but I definitely hope to see more positive vibes being sent out. I think people should be still critical. I don't disagree when people are critical, but it should be try to be at least like in a healthy environment.
Productive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Try and increase, somewhere where you're trying to help somebody rather than hinder somebody. Not just flame, but hey, some legitimate advice.
Yeah, for sure. Do you feel like being involved in the Dota scene and working with players has made you a better Dota player?
For sure. That is another thing I do miss about being a player manager. When I was a player manager, my knowledge was at an all-time high in terms of, I just would listen to their comms every game, every scrim, every time, and that's 5 days a week most of the time, and it's a lot of Dota to consume. And I think if you consume a lot of Dota, watching streams, playing the game, at least every day, you're just naturally going to get better, and you're naturally going to learn more about the game. One of the big things for me was I really wanted to just start playing more because I felt my knowledge was kind of fading away. I was focused too much on the paperwork that I have to do, for the upcoming streamers and stuff, rather than actually learning about Dota and keeping my eye on Dota.
When you do play, what role do you prefer to play?
Ooh, that's changed a lot, even in the past few months. I really am enjoying the offlane right now. I love the playmakers. I've been always a big Magnus fan. Shout out to S4, the greatest, truly the son of Mag. I think he inspired me back in the Alliance days with his play, and same with Dendi and stuff. But I've been playing a lot more offlane. Also, that hero's OP right now. Just throwing that out there. So kind of those playmakers. But I've loved playing support. I enjoy playing carry. The only role I really don't feel confident in is my mid play. I do understand the laning a little bit, and I know how to pull creeps and the creep equilibrium and stuff. But I just feel there's so many players that are better than me at that I just let other most of my friends pick that role.
Yeah, it takes a special breed to desire mid, first and foremost, and excel while desiring mid.
Yep, exactly.
Do you have any favorite heroes?
Magnus for sure. I love Pudge. Okay. Only kind of recently.
Oh,
actually. No, it's funny because it's only recently. I've never been a big Pudge fan, and then I don't know. I think 7.00 kind of came out, and I was just living that Pudge life. I really, really enjoyed playing that hero. Well, there was what else was there? Pudge. I like Slardar. I think he has a place in the scene or in the current meta right now, but it's kind of faded away a little bit. But I think hopefully we'll see a little bit of a comeback at the upcoming major. Rubik is kind of cool, even though I'm really bad at him. I love Rubik, but I'm really bad at them. I'm just so bad. And yeah, I think Magnus to me is kind of one of the big ones. Any big playmaker is always really fun. So I like Nyx a lot as well. That hero is really fun to kind of just be roam. I like roamers. I like roamers a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kiev is coming up. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about Kiev and what you're what are you predicting? Who do you feel like is looking strong going into Kiev, and or who are you rooting for?
I mean, who am I rooting for is a question I cannot truly be biased in. Okay. I think if I had to give my bias, it would be to my old players, any of the old players that I've worked with. So that teams would be Thunderbirds, which is Misery's team, OG, which is No Tail's team, and then my local boys, Arteezy, Moon Meander. They'll be both playing on those teams, or at least EG. Sorry, will be there as well. And just working with many of those guys for over the years has always been great. So I think those are my three, and they're also some of my top teams. At least OG and EG for sure. They're definitely in my top 5, 100%. It's kind of difficult with a single limb. It's harder to kind of give those nuances, right? So there's going to be teams that are just going to be the bottom 8, but what order do they fall into that bottom 8? Do they technically deserve to be in that bottom 8, or did they just lose the best of 3? There's the single limb format doesn't attribute to that. But I think if you want a safe bet OG. They've won a lot of majors, you know. IG,
Yeah, go figure.
IG with the DAC victory. It's funny. I actually thought people would figured out IG more coming into that tournament, considering they played the second most games since 7.0 came out. IGV has the most games, I'll definitely be talking about that on the panel. That's fine. Any of the local Vancouver boys. So that's Owie 2000.
Right.
I forgot. Way Too Sexy is the coach of the new Digital Chaos, so him as well.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm a decent boy. All right. That's where I'd be rooting. We'll forgive you your biases. So all right. Before I let you go, is there anything exciting coming up with Twitch that we should keep an eye out for? We should be aware of? Anything you want to plug in that regard?
I wish there was more Dota stuff. Dota is a very unique area on Twitch where it is the most split amongst its audience. So there's a lot of Russian broadcasters and a lot of English-speaking broadcasters, where most of the platform is English-speaking, or there's less of a mix. But there's lots of cool new things coming out that I can't wait for people to find out, because it's hopefully going to provide more, like I said, more opportunities for people to make revenue on Twitch and have, hopefully, like I said, more ways for them to actually maybe, end up quitting their job, or end up, having a different revenue source that they didn't know was available to them at, kind of the beginning. So.
Yeah, for sure. And of course you're going to be. I should have I can't believe I didn't introduce you this way. That you're going to be on the panel at Kiev.
I will.
That was announced. We got to see that announcement. I think it was Roland who was sitting here looking at me. He was going, "Hey, you're interviewing Conrad later, right?" I was like, "Yeah, I am." I'm looking at his name in the compendium right now.
Yep, that is me.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit of a surprise, but I'm very excited.
Yeah, I was going to ask. That's got to be thrilling. When do you head to Kiev?
I head over there on the 20th, so 2 days from when this podcast is being recorded.
Yeah, by the time you guys are hearing this, that's where Conrad's going to be. Over in Kiev,
you'll hopefully see me on the panel at that point. Hopefully, at least. I'm not sure. Actually, I don't know if the group stages have been announced yet. So
we're going to be looking for you, and we're going to be enjoying it. Really appreciate you coming on to join me here. We love Twitch. Like I said, that's during the day. Twitch is what keeps me sane at work. So
cool.
And it was fascinating to hear your history with esports. I do have one last question. I have to ask you. I try to ask everybody this. So obviously you've had maybe a more interesting and unique career in esports than anybody I've had on here before. So I'm looking forward to your answer to this question. If there are people out there who are listening to this that would like to pursue a career in esports, what would be the best single piece of advice that you could give those people?
The best thing you can do right now is start somewhere where you know you fit. The hardest thing in esports is that a lot of people apply for positions that they're not necessarily qualified for. The biggest thing you want to do is either get those qualifications and continue on, and maybe try and pursue something in esports that makes relevant sense to you. You can create jobs. That's kind of the cool thing. I look at somebody like if you know Caitlin. She's a physiotherapist. Actually, I forgot what exactly the exact term is.
Physical therapist for. You're talking about Caitlin McGee.
Yes. She's a physical therapist, and a licensed physical therapist. But she brought that to Dota, and that's really cool. Like that's something that
ergonomics.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the term we're looking for.
And she kind of created her own position. But like, say you want to be a video person, focus on making videos on esports. Do something small. Do something local. Get yourself noticed. It's really hard. I'll say this: there's not a lot of positions in esports, and I feel very lucky and very thankful of how I kind of approached and kind of got here. It's not an everyday thing, and I'm very happy to have done it, and I hope to continue it forever, if possible. Obviously, Twitch may not be here forever, but I hope esports does. Like I said, the biggest thing is that just be on that grind. Be there and try to go to as many events as possible, meet as much people. It's a lot of networking. So talking to people online and just trying to figure out where you fit best. If you think you're a good stats people, start volunteering to do stats stuff. If like I said, you do good video, maybe do a video on a local Dota player that and they might be interested in doing it. Just talking about small stuff like that. Those steps in the door, say you just get recognized on Reddit once, that could be the start of like a whole new potential career for you, especially in esports.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. This was way more fascinating. I'm sorry I asked so much about
no, the career, but it's all good. I mean, I'm happy. Maybe you want to do another one off the side. Maybe I don't know if there's like a side podcast that you guys do. Then I'd be happy to talk more about it. That's a whole podcast episode on its own.
Yeah, I can only imagine. So if you guys want to find Conrad, he is on Twitter at Conrad Jaznen. That's Janzen. And if you can't spell Conrad, I can't help you. If you want to find Twitch, well, I can't help you do that either. If you don't know how to find Twitch, you are out of luck. There's no amount of explaining I can do to get you to Twitch if you don't know what it is already. If you guys want to find us, we're defenseofthepatients.com. Follow us on Twitter at .p_show. That's DOTP_show. You can also find our Twitch at twitch.tv/.ptv. You can join the Discord, discord.gg/.p, and the YouTube, youtube.com/.ptv1. I think that's going to do it for our plugs. Oh, patreon.com/Defense of the Patients. You guys have been killer there supporting us. We really appreciate it. Remember, if we got to hit that 1,500 a month before you guys get us forcing Growdy to dress up as Viper, and I will go around in that wagon at TI. That's the $1,500 goal.
Ooh, I might have to end up throwing a few dollars that way. Then is what you're saying.
Yeah. We're gonna make our buddy dress up as Viper, and then I'm gonna make him lay on his belly, and I'm gonna drag him around in. I might have to spray paint a Red Rider green, but hey, okay. It's for the cause.
I will say this: I lost my fantasy football league this year, and I may be doing a cosplay at TI. So.
Oh,
don't lose if there's any moral of the story, folks, don't lose your fantasy football league amongst Dota people.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Again, Conrad, thanks so much for stopping by, and we hope you stay in touch, and good luck with Kiev.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me.
And until next time, this is Cyphus for Conrad saying good luck and Godspeed.